इधर 3 बजे खत्म हो जाएगा ना भाई जैसे सुबह 8 बजे कैमरा वगैरह एंट्री नहीं करना
Yo.
If anybody has Kaiwar teacups inside, you're requested to kindly keep them outside on the table.
When is the convention?
Everyone will be starting the session soon. Please settle down. If you have carried your teacups inside the auditorium, you're requested to kindly keep them outside. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final plenary session for the day before the dinner is served. What we are going to discuss here is basically around 4 themes that have been identified for this conference, that is socially and economically just alternatives, global supply chains and implication of labor, changing technology and how it affects the world of work and how work is organized, and finally building movements against neoliberalism and neo-nationalism. For this plenary session, we have actually 4 distinguished speakers here today who are quite good experts in the topics that they have been assigned for. On my right is Tapan, who is the General Secretary of the Center of Indian Trade Unions, and he has been working there since 2010. He is also a member of the Parliament in Rajya Sabha as a CPIM representative of West Bengal. He worked as a steel worker at the Steel Authority of India Limited and made his way quite up, and he was closely associated with the steel workers movement and subsequently then became the president of the Steel Workers Federation of India. On my left is Apoorva who is Kaiwar, who is the regional secretary for South Asia, IndustriALL Global Union. To my extreme right is Victor Baez, who is a Paraguayan, but he lives in Brazil, and he is the General Secretary of Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, and he is also the Deputy General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. And finally, we have Patrick Ruther, who is a country representative and head of Office of Frederick Ebert Stiftung in India. He was previously actually stationed in Germany as part of the FES business network, promoting social dialogue and focusing on the digital change and the effects on business and society. Patrick actually loves to think out of the box, and he loves to show that there are always alternative ways to the norm that can be adopted. So today we might be having a lot of interesting thoughts, out of the box solutions for the problems we face today. So I'm going to turn first to Tapan actually, who's going to be talking about building movements against neoliberalism and neo-nationalism. Now Tapan, the question to you is that there's actually a rise in strong divisive policies, whether one takes into consideration ethnicity, caste, gender, or even on the religious lines. And you know what you see is also that there is an increased nationalist fervor. Whether you're talking about India, whether you're talking about Europe, or whether you're talking about the US today. So in a sense, this is quite incompatible with the trade union movement, or what the trade union concept actually means on unity and diversity. So my question to you is, what are the key challenges that you actually see in building movements against neoliberalism and neo-nationalism?
Thank you. I can tell the experience earned by me in the process of working in the trade union movement in my country, and also keeping eyes open to the developments that were going on all over the world Now, so far as the struggle against neoliberalism is concerned, since 1991, the country's trade union, our country is featured with a multiplicity of trade unions, so many trade union confederations. Even within left, there are multiple number of trade unions, plus non-left major trade union confederations are there. Since 1991, the initiative was taken by the left trade unions to unify the workers at the grassroots level and also at the national level, different trade unions. And in that process, the first ever strike against that general strike, 29th November 1991, it started, only mainly the left trade unions. The major trade union confederation in the country, non-left, INTUCA and BMS was outside the purview of the strike. And thereafter, around 12 general strike, countrywide general strike took place till 2008. And in that, the new phenomena is that the trade union, major trade union confederation who are not within that joint platform of strike, their unions at the workplace level also joined in that strike code in a big way. And in that process, from 2009 onwards, all the trade union confederations in the country and many independent major federations, particularly in the service sector, almost the trade union movement in its entirety came to the joint platform, and 4 more general strike, countrywide general strike took place. So as on date, right from the inception of the neoliberal process through a formal resolution in the parliament, 1991, 17 general strike took place, the latest one being 2nd September 2016. And besides this countrywide general strike, in each and every general strike every year, had been a convergence of numerous sectoral actions, including strike actions. And sectoral actions includes the coal, engineering, steel, financial sector was a major segment of that struggle, and also the public employees, both state government and central government employees, they are all the major federations. Defense production employees, there are numerous sectoral actions which finally converge into a countrywide general strike. This is the pattern, is continuing with a continuity till last general strike, 2nd September 2016, where even the media admitted that around 180 million workers took place in the strike, participated in the strike, and around 30% of the strikers was not organized in any union. It was a general atmosphere that could be created by this joint platform of trade union movement, totally united, that created that impact that even the non-unionized section of workers, in a big way, they also joined the strike. So this is the whole interventions which India's trade union movement is working with, and the latest program they have taken on 8th of August to a national convention in Talkatoda Stadium, participated by more than 6,000 workers. That on 9th, 10th and 11th November, a continuous 3-day squatting will be on the national capital, where it is estimated that around 100,000 workers will participate every day, and that can be more also as the preparation is going on. And the convention has also given a call, given the aggressive the policies the government is pursuing, to prepare, given a call for preparing for indefinite strike action countrywide in the days to come. That call for preparation has also gone. So, self-critically looked into the thing, I have been hearing in the earlier session, there was a saying that trade union movement, labor movement is getting weakened. Yes, there are some jumps of truth is there. But at the same time, so far Indian soil is concerned, trade union membership, all the confederations are increasing. This is number one. Number two, action is not only limited within the organized sector, but even in the informal sector, so-called unorganized sector, certain important powerful movement has also emerged, and particularly in the women-dominated sector. We call it a movement of the scheme workers. Very powerful movement has developed, which during this intervening period, in the every state level, asserted their right, asserted their movemental strength, and snatched many concessions from those provincial government on their honorariums and other facilities. So this is a new situation. This is the situation in which the Indian trade union movement has been planning unitedly to fight against neoliberalism. Now, given this, there are certain critical, self-critical points. Our realization is that, my organization, that still now we are fighting against the impact. When workers coming on strike, sometimes braving state repression in many places, they are still fighting against the impact. They could not recognize the policy regime and the politics behind that. So, a dichotomy still exists. The same worker who's so militantly taking part in the programs being decided jointly by the trade unions, the same one against the impact of a policy regime, neoliberal policy regime, at the time of election, they are supporting many of the political combinations who are mainly supporting this neoliberal policy regime. That dichotomy still exists. And the trade union movement is self-critically noting that and trying to develop a higher consciousness that we have to fight not only against the impact, but also the policy and the politics behind that, and recognize the main enemy on the political front. Now, with this project, I believe particularly the left trade union movements are working. I just came from a tripartite meeting called by the Ministry of Labour dealing on the Industrial Relations Bill, a new proposal has brought, and I was watching the PowerPoint presentation by our comrades from Turkey. These are the rights are to be curtailed. So at almost the prototype today the government has proposed where there will be no right to strike, and 98% of the industrial establishments will be subjected to permission-free hire and fire regime. After they can retrench, lay off, closure without permission of the government, without any regulation. They are being empowered to retrench, lay off, and closure. So a trade union fee, a right on the right to strike, a virtual ban is imposed. So this is the proposal. It is not yet passed. What I like to tell you in retrospect that this exercise was being attempted since 1991 itself. Till 2014, the government could not dare to even officially propose this kind of a legislative change. They supplemented this failure of theirs by flagrantly violating whatever law is there, rather promoting violation, and against that trade union movement also formulated their demands. So this is the general scenario in Indian soil on which we are fighting against, and this witness is still prevailing through the dichotomy that the same workers who so militantly remained in the front line of strike struggles, the same worker against which he is striking, practically bringing back to their political power, who are pursuing the same brand of policy. So this dichotomy has to be overcome. This is the task before us. Now, so far as the neo-nationalism and other divisive items are concerned. I don't consider that to be a nationalism at all. We may identify these as neo-nationalism, but what kind of nationalism? In our government also, in our country, in every word they are invoking nationalism. They are destroying the country's indigenous manufacturing base through a process of privatization. Particularly in the defense sector, the plan they have taken. Till now, Indian defense production sector delivers 75% of the country's defense, army's defense forces requirement. The plan they are making, they are going to completely privatize and make the whole thing dependent on the foreign companies. Is this nationalism at all? Can there be anything more anti-national like this? So nationalism is a cover being articulated by the neoliberal order, the capitalist class, to address their crises. And so also the divisive forces, communal machinations on the society, spreading venom of disunity and disruption among the people. They are doing that in order to divide the people so that they don't resist. While our challenge is to heighten our present struggle against the impact of neoliberalism to the resistance by identifying the policy regime, overcoming the dichotomy. On the other hand, they also understand their class positions in order to sustain in the midst of the deepest ever aggravated crisis. They are making these an instrument in their hand, and those who are governing in the government are just working as an agents of this neoliberal capitalist class. This is how we understand that. There is no nationalism in it. No germs of nationalism in it, and that needs to be exposed. And in the welcome thing is that in this latest, our joint exercise, now this has also adapted as a task in the Joint Trade Union Convention, where to fight against communalism and divisive forces has been made also important, agenda number one. Number two, the trade union movement sought to expand its horizon, also to join hands with the farmers movement and also other class and mass organizations, and a broadened platform of class and mass organizations has been formed to fight against the same force of neoliberalism. So I think these are the elements of bigger unity, consciously to fight against these divisive forces, which are nothing but an instrument of in the hands of the neoliberal order. So the broader alliance has to be on the understanding that we are against liberalism, neoliberalism. That must be the understanding. That is how we and I understand in the matter of broadening alliance to fight these divisive forces, communal forces, and so-called neo-nationalism, which is neither nationalism, which is only to sustain their right to loot and plunder on the people and the national assets. I think this is how Indian trade union movement looks at the issue and try to advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tapan. That's quite an interesting intervention, and actually I like the way you said it in the end, that we have to broaden the alliances to fight against the divisive forces. And it's interesting to see that you want to broaden the base going into the agricultural and the informal sector. Let me now turn to Apoorva. Actually, you've been working quite a bit on the issues of labor standards, apart from looking at some of the gender issues too. Now, within the context of the whole global supply chains, which has been increasing over the past decade especially, and what you see is a lot of exploitation and a huge violation of rights within it. And what's happened also is, in the whole process of global supply chains, one thought that there would be some benefits that the labor might be getting, both in terms of the wages or in terms of productivity. But what you have seen is you're not actually getting any of those returns in the process. But there are a whole lot of other questions that are there too. But what I would like to actually ask you is, given the precarious conditions in which many of the workers in the global supply chains are working, what do you think is the potential of international labor standards and human rights due diligence obligations for business? And how can basic labor standards, living wages, and development objectives actually be met?
Thank you, Uma, for this. Actually, that's to just put the focus of the problem in some terms of number. ITUC's report in January 2016 said that of the MNC labor force, 94% of their labor force is in the supply chain. So it's hidden and it's in the supply chain. So that is the extent of the problem that we're looking at. 94% of the workforce is actually in the supply chain. Coming to question of international standards or development goals, how do they help? I think the first thing is actually they can only help when we are able to locate where these workers are working. So some amount of transparency in the supply chains, some amount of disclosure of where actually the production is happening by the MNCs. That is the fundamental thing that we have to actually look for. So I think the first point that we start with should be that where are actually the MNCs producing, not in terms of the global south or not in terms of Africa and Asia or Latin America, but actually where is the plant located, which EPZ, which street. Can we get the companies to tell us what is the address of their production facility? And that is where we can actually start to make a difference, because that is the fundamental problem. And we at IndustriALL have signed global framework agreements with about 46 companies, auto companies, chemical companies, retail companies in the garment sector, where one of the things that we actually first demand, and it's getting better over time because we are also learning over a period of time, is first to say that disclose your production sites, and as unions we need access to your supplier sites. Because unless we are able to organize workers, unless workers know that they're actually producing for this company, which is a multinational and has, in its code of conduct, in the GSA it signs with the global unions, in the kind of public shaming that it can be subjected to, unless the workers know that they are working for this company, how do we even begin to start getting them to organize and getting them to say that we have to fight for a better wage? This company, is making so much profit out of you, and all that you're putting in all the surplus. The surplus value being extracted is so tremendously high, and how do we actually get that message to workers? So we need to know where they're working. We need to know where the companies are producing. I think this is the fundamental thing. So I think when we talk about global standards, the ILO has in 2015 and 16 it has been debating some amount of a convention on supply chains, which I think is a very good thing to do. But unless we are able to identify where we are producing, that's not going to make any difference. And ILO has recognized that the global framework agreements that companies, MNCs, are forced to now sign with global unions may actually be a better way of regulating the supply chain. I think this is one thing that I would like to talk about. But on the fundamental issue is that it's very heartening to know that when Comrade Tapan said that the membership in unions is increasing. We work with our affiliates, we work with local unions to make sure that we are able to increase membership. All of us work with unions, I mean, the fundamental thing is to make sure that we have a strong enough membership on the ground to be able to deal with these challenges. So it's very heartening to know that it is increasing. But unfortunately, I don't think we can already see that. We are not able to see the effect of the membership increase already. And I think this is something that is going to take a lot of effort from unions on the ground, from national centers, from global union federations, and all of us to make sure that we can put in whatever that we have to make sure that there are more and more workers being organized, and hopefully in the supply chain. For IndustriALL, I think, I'm sorry to keep on saying IndustriALL, but I'm from IndustriALL and I'm keep speaking from there. It is very important that we do recognize that unless we target workers in the global supply chain, we will not be able to achieve much with any MNC. Because if we are going to have 95%, 94% of their workforce in the global supply chain outside their home countries, we are not going to be able to influence any MNC to come and talk to us, to come and negotiate with us, to come and sign an agreement with us, unless they know that we have a substantial number of their workers organized in the global supply chain, I mean, across countries. So I think this is where I would say that this is what brings us the focus back. It is not so much development goals, or it is not so much international standards that can help. Of course, they help. It helps in setting standards. But what actually helps is for us to organize more, is for us to demand that companies disclose where they produce, and fight for access to those sites for unions. I mean, we have a situation where union busting is so common when, whether in South Asia, whether in Latin America, in the US, union busting is so common that we don't even bat an eyelid when we hear that, this union was busted, or, people were beaten up, or people were, jailed by the police. The management used police force to break up a demonstration of workers demanding the right to be represented by union. I think we have to start getting outraged by it once again. That union busting is not acceptable, and then we have to fight for it. So I think we have to go back to fighting for what are basic trade union rights, to be represented by a union, to stand up and be counted. And only after that can we actually say that we will be in a position to enforce any of the international legal standards. I think, for me, that's it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Apoorva, for that. I'm going to continue on the same question of precarity and talk to you, Ruther, ask you a question around it. What we have seen is, within the Latin American countries, that there has been a big push of formalizing a lot of the informal workers. So going by that experience, what do you think are still the challenges that you see when we are talking about socially and economically just alternative from the Latin American experience?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Well, actually, all the formalization of the workers that was being made by progressive governments is going backwards again. But I would like to start trying to answer to your question, because in the former panel I heard some things. We are talking about weak trade unionism in the world. In fact, we have just 15% of the workers are organized in the world. 85% are not organized. So one of our jobs is to keep organizing people. The other is to make a policy of alliances with other sectors, what you said, sir. With the organizations of women, with the organizations of peasants, with the human rights organizations and others. And third, we have to eliminate asymmetries of concepts. And we have done that. We have constructed what we call the Development Platform for the Americas. Is it possible to construct something that can maybe that can be made jointly by Canadian workers, US workers, Argentinian workers, Brazilian workers, Guatemalan workers, and Haitian workers. And Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world. Yes, it is. And you can go to our webpage and see what we have constructed. And the numbers of affiliation are important. But in the construction of a union is also important what we defend. And right now we have an agreement from Canada to Argentina on a development platform for the Americas. The other thing that we are doing, and we keep doing, is that we defend. It's not the same for us to have a right-wing government than a progressive government. We say that we are independent unions, but not indifferent unions. So, having that, we think that we have to go to the offensive. What's going to the offensive? We have to centrifugate again the political debates. Because this is not new. In the times of Pinochet, and after Pinochet, there was a centrifugation of the political discussion. The right wing simulated to come to the center, and the left wing, or the progressive wing, authentically came to the center. The right wing simulated. So everybody was speaking about what? Economy. You went to hear the debate in the Chilean parliament, and you couldn't distinguish who was socialist and who was a pro-Pinochet senator, for instance. Well, that continues happening. We still have unions that are saying we have to negotiate to lose the less. Why should we negotiate to lose the less?
Yeah.
In the second negotiation, we negotiate again to lose the less. In the third negotiation, we have nothing to negotiate because we have lost everything. So we have to go to the offensive. How can we go to the offensive? For instance, here we spoke about migration. There was a question this afternoon about migration. And listen, I believe that we are, on the issue of migration, in the ILO, we, as trade unions, are on a defensive policy. We're just looking for equal treatment for the workers in the countries of destination. So how can we go to an offensive policy? According to some NGOs, there are illicit financial outflows of $1 trillion every year from developing countries to the banks of developed countries. That's one big reason for migration. Because if that $1 trillion was used to create labor policies, social policies in the countries of origin of the migrants, they should stay there. But why don't we touch the issue? Why don't we denounce that? And out of that $1 trillion, 83% of that $1 trillion is being sent away. You know, in what way? In the form of fake invoices, international trade. Why don't we denounce that? Why don't we put that on the discussion? Why don't we go for discussions like the creation of precarization? Why don't we discuss the issue of the international investment? According to the ECLAC, the Economic Committee for Latin America and the Caribbean, $1 million of foreign investment can create from 1 to 6 jobs. And that's in Latin America, but that can also happen here in India. $1 million, 1 to 6 jobs creates one external investment. If we try to bring $1 trillion, $1 billion of international investment to any country in Latin America, how many jobs can that bring? Up to 6,000 jobs. That's not the problem of our countries. 6,000 jobs. And the ECLAC says also that the big enterprises they own 70% of the economies of our countries, that create just 10%. And instead of that, the medium and small enterprises create, they own just 10% of the economies of our countries, but they create 60% of the jobs. What happened? What happened with the development plans? Why don't we put that? Why don't we denounce what's going on on a firm basis and in a very energetic way in order to negotiate for losing the less? For the moment, I said that.
Thank you very much, Mr. I'm going to turn to you last. There's actually been, especially in the West, and I think it's gaining a lot of attention here, also in India, a lot of talk about robotization, digitalization, artificial intelligence, and how it's going to impact the whole world of work. And I think the question that often comes up is this whole digital labor, whether you're talking of crowd work or a whole lot of apps and all of this. You know, how is it going to change the way we work, with organizing the way we work, and also affecting the lives of the workers? Can you reflect a bit on that?
I think at the core of my presentation is you would be surprised that when we're talking about the whole digital world and the digital changes coming to us do actually have nothing to do with technology themselves. But for that I have to start kind of demystifying of this whole hype of this industry 4.0 and whatever is happening, all these big disruptions, which will change the world completely within a few days. Actually, there's a lot out there when we're talking about digital change, when we're talking about technology, and we have to distinguish between the evolutionary part of it and the revolutionary part of it. Because actually what we're actually seeing happening is not so new at all. So basically we're overestimating the disruptive forces which are actually disrupting business models, because, I mean, being based here in India for quite a while, and there is this big narrative on Startup India, on Digital India, but in all other countries there's this huge focus on e-commerce. So there's the Amazons of the world coming in, there's e-commerce, and everyone talking about new channels for retailing, high outreach, and that is revolutionizing the world, how we work. Yes, it's creating problems, but actually we're still talking about retail. If Walmart were to come here building up the centers, it would be kind of a similar pattern, except that now we're talking, well, it's an evolutionary process that now it's become digitalized. Same goes for logistics and delivery service, which are booming, particularly in this country, which has worrying consequences. For example, if you see here the delivery boys on their bikes with backpacks, with sizes being able to carry like 50 kilos, and you can imagine just looking at like after 1 year that basically their spine is broken, and that is posing serious questions. But then again, even before the times of e-commerce and internet, you can go to any shop and you're asked to get things delivered at your home, so also that is nothing actually new. Talking about robots and machines, well, also we have seen automation coming in for quite some time. I mean, the pace is adding up, and yes, it's true that jobs are not being created, But then the same goes for investment. In that sense, it would be interesting to see if we invest this trillions of dollars in a time of jobless growth. Does that actually create the jobs, or does it help getting the robots using better products and not getting like just struggling workers on the field? Then comes in the online platforms, because I mean, all of you know that what perceived as the biggest disruptions are these digital platforms like Uber, like Airbnb, really disrupting the tourist industry and the taxis. But then again, also it's I mean, the general concept is not as new. Usually, you had like a taxi call center where you call to get a taxi to get you from A to B. Now you're using an app, so again, it's kind of not so new as with regards to the business models. And actually what we have seen, and that is the very, very crucial point, but I'm kind of skipping that to the second part when we're looking on good, positive examples, is that you can regulate these kind of platforms. And we've seen it just at the moment, the discussions in London of banning Uber because they're not applying to the laws. And I mean, there has been the question of are they a technology firm or are they actually a transport service? And we've seen it all over the place, all over the world, having the same discussions. But after certain times, that legal requirements, legal frameworks were adapting, so they basically had to apply to the same rules as taxi companies. Skipping that one. When it comes, I mean, of course, it's easy to regulate and to put forward legislation of regulating these kind of business models, but then, of course, but that is also, again, not very new. Particularly in South Asia, the problem is actually with the form of implementing the laws, not having the laws. We have wonderful laws in India of minimum wages, etc., etc. And but what happens if you only have 2 labor inspectors per state, covering 17,000 factories? So that doesn't really work. So I think that is a challenge, but again, that's not so new. Actually, so what my actual point is, and I'm coming to it, why we're actually not talking about technology, all these changes happening have created some sort of new mindset. And there's a new mindset that we are not addressing. We're actually using trade union models that were built at the time when basically the big metal industries, steel industries was growing, and it's reflecting also in the way that our political systems are working. It's very, very vertical, and you're kind of collecting from the plant level up to have a consolidated mechanism, and so people are negotiating on top and kind of trying to find sector-wise solutions. These organizations are kind of very from kind of top-down usually, although it should be the other way around. They're also mostly dominated by men, sometimes even senior men, and that has created a lot of problems among all. And we've seen now a new generation of millennials that is growing up with easy access to internet, with easy seeing what's happening out there in the world, what they want to achieve, and to creating aspirations. And it's that aspirations and a growing impatience that things are moving not fast enough, they're very slow. Look, there's this people, this union, this is just always talking of blocking what's perceived as progress. So they don't want to wait for it, they just want to have it now. And this has also been triggered as with this startup narrative. And actually, I'd argue that this what's happening, in particularly in the Silicon Valley, it's actually what we have seen with the financial brokers in the years they had before. Because there is this reckless, ruthless generation, but the narrative is that, and that's the interesting part of they're going there to make the world a better place. So they want to disrupt the world because they don't want to wait anymore. They're fed up with the systems because they're so slow, they're not delivering. So let's rethink the world. And that's this magic and aspiration that this young generation is being fed up, being fed, and then fed up with the current system. And there's this notion of everything is possible, no? So and that is a challenge because trade unions, there's a disconnect. They cannot really connect to that new reality. Or to put, but we've seen that we've seen it in all political, in the political sphere, with a lot of traditional parties losing members, labor forces, labor parties are usually declining. We've seen it in the feminist movement. And we've seen, and I mean, as working for FES, and you know better than I do, how difficult it is for a feminist to, we just had a case where people in highly educated gender studies graduates who prefer to get an arranged marriage, go to Australia because getting an Australian citizenship seems kind of a cheaper and easier way to get things done. Then the other way is how difficult it is to reach out to flight attendants in the Gulf Airlines because the money they're paying is so good. They know, like, well, we have their labor violation, they're taking away our passports, and I might need to sleep with my boss, but hey, the money is fine. I'm only working there for 2 years, then I'm gone anyway. How can trade unions address these kind of attitudes? But it's out there, and that is posing a huge, huge challenge, and that is actually the biggest challenge that it's posing. But then you see also that, particularly with the startup narrative, you see there is growing criticism also, because you see, again, now it's not the old male, it's the young male. It's very white dominated. You see all these problems with sexual harassment, and you see the ruthless, the recklessness, and how they're entering into markets and basically destroying all the legal regulations that we've fought for. Because they just do stuff and then ask later. And then there's a time gap with regulation and how we can adapt on that. And I think that is kind of, that's the disconnect, that we still have to find working common language, how to reach out to that sort of generation and tell them the added value of having unions.
I have a choice, but I ask the audience for it before I go ahead. Either, if you have some questions, I could take it. Otherwise, I also have some burning questions that I want to put back to the panel. So, you have. Okay. Huh?
Go ahead with your questions.
There are two of them who have actually raised their hands, so I'm going to give them a chance, and then go ahead with my question.
Marcelo from Brazil. Comrade Tapan, thank you for your presentation. I think when you put that the workers are mobilized and they are fully unionized and they are doing strikes, and you want to jump into class conscience so they can vote for the left, don't you think there's a middle range that we have to fulfill in the middle strongly, that is opening up our unions to this broad alliance that you spoke, so we can include the precarious, the non-organized, the human, the farmers, so the union can be what they really are, the war machine of the working class. And for you, compañero Victor, the thing is, you said, let's go for the offensive. But in our context, we spent 20 years being friendly with the local bourgeoisie and not separating us for our grassroots base, so they would look at us and watching us compromising, and even our vote would be for compromising situations. So it's kind of difficult to turn the shift. And now we have to reinvent ourselves in order to find new solutions. And I think goes from Mexico to Chile this way.
Can you just introduce yourself as you ask the question and be short with the question?
Hi, my name is Apoorva and I'm an organizer from ITF. Hello, hi, my name is Atika and I'm an organizer from ITF. I have two questions, one to Comrade Singh. Building up on what our brother said, I just wanted to ask you, like you're saying, that the membership in India has been increasing. However, what is your opinion on the fact that even though the membership is increasing, the density is quite low in India? Because there's a vast, like Sister Apoorva said, that there's a vast majority of supply chain. Just one example that is transparent, and a lot of workers there are not being identified and not being organized at all. So, and from the previous discussion, we heard that low density means that unions won't have any power to create any change. So, what is your opinion on that? And my second question is for Sister Apoorva. it's quite good that trade unions have been signing global framework agreements with companies, and it's actually quite an interesting change that we have seen. However, like you were saying, that the supply chains are very hidden. Is there a clause or something that has been negotiated by IndustriALL to make sure that these supply chains are not hidden and are transparent, and we can identify the places where we can go and organize? Because in my personal opinion, most of the global framework agreements are quite generic, where the companies say that yes, we recognize the right to form a union, but they actually don't. So I just wanted to ask you that. Thank you. Thank you. Here.
Thank you very much. My name is Francisca. I'm from the FES Bangladesh. I'm here in the office there. I have questions, but also a comment. I think it's really important to take it into consideration the upcoming days, because you have mentioned 85% are not unionized, and we all know to support the trade union movement, we have to support more workers becoming members of the union. So my question is, and Patrick also said, laws may be there, but maybe not followed in various countries. So what do we do given the trend and given the developments that we see that more and more countries to actually attract foreign investment will start special economic zone EPZs? It's very common in Bangladesh where actually they create spaces where investment will take place, where buyers will buy, where buyers will source and so on. But speaking on behalf of Bangladesh, for instance, there the labor law does not apply. For instance, there's no freedom of association. In addition, we see trends not only in Bangladesh, also worldwide, where so-called trade unions are actually established. In Bangladesh, they are called, for instance, participation committees, but these are not trade unions. So they are actually appointed with the support, let's call it like this, with the employer. And I think we also need to find answers from a trade union movement side, from workers' rights activists. What do we do given these trends that there are more and more spaces in countries, even though they may have labor laws that we would consider as in line with the ILO core conventions, but actually more and more workers are working in these specific zones. And the second point is what the sister was saying before about transparency. How actually can we support trade unions worldwide, and also solidarity between trade unions worldwide, that they also lobby or actually demand more that policies like the OECD guidelines or others are actually implemented, and also legally implemented. Because I think we need to also look at the other side of the global supply chain. So we need to look into countries in Europe, for instance. There's a law in France which is demanding that multinational companies are actually doing a lot for transparency along with due diligence. And maybe it's my view from Bangladesh, but we are trying to learn best how we can also convince us being here in the global south to demand more, that actually the ones at the very beginning of the global supply chain have to be compliant, and that there are legal actually agreements that these multinational companies and brands and so on really have to do their job at the very beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question.
Hi, I have a comment and a question. The comment is for the comrades. There's a perception that that I have built over the last few years watching the labor movement, which I'm fairly certain is shared by a growing section among the broader left, that this whole idea of an annual national strike day strikes me a bit as if we have allowed it to become a sort of ritualized form of protest. I believe that if we do need to go on an offensive, as Comrade Victor said, that the labor movement cannot be restricted just to 1 or maybe 3 strike days in a year, that we need a larger movement that continues, that doesn't just stop after 1 day. My question is primarily for Comrade Sen, but I'd like all of you to weigh in on it. In India, under the current labor situation, where you have over half the workers, even in your organized enterprises, working under informal employment, and where you have the rise of this gig economy where you're not sure whether someone's an employee or someone's a contractor. What potential do you see for replacing the current top-down enterprise level unionizing? What potential do you see in replacing it with a sectoral, with organization on a sectoral level, for instance, among say the auto sector, or among geographical levels? Say in Chile in the 1970s, the industrial belts had their own unions. We have a lot of industrial belts that are being developed in this country. Do you think they can be organized on a geographical level? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come back for a second round. I'm just going to pose two more questions to Patrick and one to all. The question to all of you is, apart from what's been raised and it's related to that, is what are the policy options, or what options or strategies do you think could be adopted to address some of these challenges that are coming? And to you, Patrick, apart from this question is, you've been talking about digital labor, but one of the digital labor is this whole digital platforms that we are seeing. The rise of digital platforms, the micro-tasks, whether it's Amazon Mechanical Turk, Crowdflower, Micro Worker, or Click Worker, and there's huge body of Indian workers actually competing on this so-called global labor platform. And then you also have macro tasks like platforms like the Upwork and all, which are project-based, where Indians have not been able to make so much entry as they have been able to do it. And it actually relates to the last point that has been raised, saying, you know, there's absolutely no regulation. And this is probably the services sector, global supply chains that you see. So you know what kind of labor laws, and there's a very clear-cut no employer-employee relationship again here. They all themselves declare themselves as freelancers. So you know what kind of national laws or global laws can we bring in? So I start with you, Patrick, and go in the reverse order.
Okay, so I just have to find that one solution. Huh? I'd like to first comment on one of the questions, and particularly, well, first of all, the gig economy is happening, and it already has been more or less replaced traditional stuff. Go and look in the garment sector, and it's there. Also with automotive, it's there. Coming to that question of the free trade zones and how difficult it has become to the special economic zones. I think there is, and that's the tricky point, apart from what the colleagues will probably say on this. The tricky part is, and why at some point labor movement has not been strong or kind of lost control, is we're lost in that what I call anti-trap. Because what we will do is you're fighting these economic zones because, you know, there's no labor laws, there's no labor regulation, and also usually trade unions sometimes are kind of trapped in this, we're anti-something. Because we're always coming there protesting against, you know, these violations and then this economic zone. But look, there's this narrative, they're bringing the jobs, they're bringing economy, they're helping. And that is actually, there's a valid point fighting against that, of course. But is you never win elections for being anti-anything. And I think that is, whether we like it or not, and of course we have to fight for the cause, but I think that's the tricky part, is that what is our alternative vision? And then everyone probably in the room will say, well, of course we need decent work and solidarity. Yes, but if we go outside the room and we talk to other people on the street, would they agree? Or what does that mean, actually, decent work? It's the same trap that the feminist movement is like, everyone agrees, of course you're feminists, of course we want gender equality. We go out there, talk to people, and they're like, oh, yeah, they're not joining the cause. How come? And that is the really difficult part of turning this perception that trade unions are the ones that blocking progress. They're always anti-anything, particularly with this new aspirational generation, is creating a problem. So what the trick is, but then, because we also, I mean, we know the problems, but in that sense we also know the solutions, is we need to make a way like, well, trade union is more, it's a family, it's solidarity. But we're not solidarity helping you, and of course we're helping you with the last help of resort kind of thing. But actually we need to empower them, because if you have a strong social security net, actually we want to empower people to go out in the world and do whatever they want to do and to be happy and for that. And that can only work if they don't have to worry in anything, so that is actually the core concept of solidarity. And that kind of, so trade union has to be a family that is taking care of you, but giving you the wings to fly. And I think that's the kind of message that somehow has to convey on that, and I'll stop here for the moment.
Ruther.
Yeah, I don't think we have to reinvent ourselves. I think the labor movement has to recover the principles under which our predecessors created the international labor movement and the national labor movements. Solidarity, class, and things like that. The class struggle is being admitted by the millionaires right now, and we are still hesitating if we are going to use that. Let me be very frank with that. I have seen documents signed by our colleagues saying that the ILO has to benefit the workers, the governments, and the employers. What's that? Oh, according to the reasons under which the ILO was founded, the ILO was founded to fight for social justice. And what social justice is? The equality of the unequal. So who has the ILO has to favor? There's things that I don't understand that are defensive policies. For instance, the story of the sustainable enterprises, which is a story invented. I'm not attacking the ILO. I'm defending, on the contrary, I'm defending the ILO. The sustainable development was a concept, a program invented by the big enterprises in the ILO. But let's do some questions. Is it possible a sustainable enterprise in a world that is not sustainable? Second question, is it possible a sustainable enterprise in a world made unsustainable by the big enterprises? So why don't we address those discussions? Oh, we have to go to the offensive. Sometimes they tell me, we have to, how can we go to the offensive? We are very weak. What's the solution so? So we stay on the defensive and waiting until they kill us all. They kill all of our rights, like they are doing in Brazil right now. So, but we are. I don't use. Listen, I always say that the European unions are not the strongest. They are the less weak. They are the less weak. I also say that in the Americas we are the second less weak. But we have to use that in order that we give more flesh and more muscle to the labor movement everywhere. The day before yesterday we had a meeting with the European Confederation of Trade Unions, the TUCA and the European Confederation of Trade Unions. And there is no way out of the European crisis. There is no way out of the crisis of the Americas, just in the Americas and just in Europe. The way out of the crisis depends on everybody, of all the regions, of the struggle of all the regions. We have to understand that the struggle is global. So, but we are also mobilizing. We are also, for instance, in November, on the day of our struggle for democracy and against neoliberalism in Uruguay, we will start 2 days, for the 3 days, from the 16th of November to the 18th. We'll start with a strike of 3 hours, a general strike of 3 hours of the Uruguayan workers, and every organization of the Americas will be present there in a process of discussion and in a process of measures at the regional level, but also at the national level, in the fight for democracy and against neoliberalism. We are mobilizing.
Thank you very much, Victor. That was quite thought-provoking. I have to say that we need to have a bilateral discussion But ILO stands for social justice, and it's clearly a tripartite organization. So Apoorva, you can go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, just to add, but you know, the ILO was established in 1919, and not really as a tripartite. I mean, it supposedly tripartite, but it was a left system. So I think that is not something that ILO should forget. Anybody else can, but ILO shouldn't forget that. Just coming quickly back to Atika's question, yes, we do negotiate now. We have learned from our mistakes of the past, and we now negotiate in our global framework agreements a disclosure clause. Some companies don't put it on the website, they give us, and then we pass it on to our affiliates that these are the sites of production, but we definitely do negotiate that. We have learned. I actually want to come back to the comrade's question here about sectoral level, industrial area level unions. And I think that's important, but they can in no way supplement, they can only supplement enterprise level unions. We do have instances in Pune. We have, IndustriALL has an affiliate of independent unions, about 100 odd company unions who've come together as the Shramik Ekta Mahasabh in the Pune industrial area. So I'm sure there are these kind of developments across. But I think one thing that we need to remember is that in Bangalore, I don't know if you followed, about 1.5 years back, garment workers came onto the streets and they were actually able to get the EPF rules rolled back the same evening. But they have never been able to negotiate a single collective bargaining agreement in any factory. So while they may not, so they can come together. But I think when we want talking of building density to build union power, I don't think there can be an alternative to enterprise level unions. We have to build density in companies where we can negotiate.
You see, my first response is that so-called neo-nationalism. It is not despite neoliberalism, neo-nationalism. It is but for neoliberalism, the present ugly face of neoliberalism and neo-nationalism and many other factors which are in the which are being played by the exploiting class to impose a bitter exploitation on the whole working people. And it's a global phenomenon. It is not a particular national phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. So global solidarity is of crucial importance. When we are talking of neo-nationalism, 3rd October, at the call of World Federation of Trade Union, the call was there to observe World Action Day on the problem of refugees, and immigrants. Only yesterday, and worldwide this was observed, even India also in different places. It was observed through mobilization of the workers and flagging the issues. So there is global solidarity and global cooperation has got an immense value, and many global trade union organizations are doing it in their own way. Number 3, again, I think I fully endorse the idea. We often talk about social partnership in the tripartite. Now our experience, even today, I came from a theatre in the Labour Ministry, where the two social partners, government and the employers, they fully gang up in devising an industrial relations bill for the workers, which practically thrown out 98% of the industrial workforce out of the coverage of protection of all the labor rights. Still now in this civilized society, to keep us presentable in the society, we have to talk about social partnership. There is no other go. We are going to ILO programs. We are also participating in ILO. But this is the contradiction. And the dichotomy, the problem I have referred to, I think is also a byproduct of this kind of our dilemma on keeping us presentable and respectable in this society. That is also a problem. And the problem comes out of the systemic crisis. Problem comes out of the illusion to find a solution within the system itself, which by its own dynamics is going to be more repressive, and that's how the law of the motion of capital operates. That's how. So I think the main thing is to reach ourselves to that consciousness. Let us try collectively in that direction. The gentleman talked about the ritual strikes. Yes, you may always call it. But we look at it in a different angle. We could maintain a continuity of opposition to neoliberalism. Among the obscene dance by big intellectuals either, now many of them have changed their tune. I'm talking since 1991. In 92, 93, we have gone to ILO, at an ILO conference. Many of my trade union colleagues teased me, "Arey, you are opposing globalization." Teased us. We could maintain a continuity. And that way, to keep the agenda alive, that neoliberalism is not the cup of tea of the common people, to the working people. If there is much better way, somebody you can discover, it will be property of the entire movement, we will follow suit. But nevertheless, I think this is not a place to describe. In the world of war, even in our country, many struggles are continuing. Multiple day strike, very hard bargaining. You talked about automobile sector. What is the story of the Hyundai workers in Tamil Nadu? It is a story of a very bitter struggle. Here is not the place to describe that. These are going. And these sectoral actions converges, pulling together all different multiple trade union centers to a single point of action that is needed to maintain the continuity. And I think if a better avenue is there, kindly show us, we'll follow you blindly. And about trade union density, definitely density is much less in our country. Hardly 12% to 13% is organized, unionized workforce. But still it is increasing. Informal sector, a big part is getting gradually organized in trade unions. In Europe, situation is different. Their population is very small. Here 120 billion people, 1.2 billion people. So it is increasing, and gradually a newer section is coming. May not be that is with a much visible density in that informal sector. May not be. But gradually even a big part of the informal sector, say construction sector, say scheme workers, say the small tobacco workers, in the jute sector, they are getting organized gradually, and they are in struggle also regularly. So it is there. So despite trade union densities, when unionization is at a low level, but even from low level, gradually it is increasing, and it is increasing through struggles only. Regular conflicts, contradiction. In fact, through class struggle, the class is getting organized. And I think there is no other shortcut way to do that. And in our moderate way, modest way, we are trying to do that. I think these are the issues. And another thing is contract worker. Yes, they are being organized. Yes, there are a dichotomy in many industries where regular workers are organized, contract workers are not. But yet there are industries, say steel, say petroleum, where trade union organization movement is much more mature. Their regular workers are also taking initiative to organize contract workers, because they realize that their own bargaining power will be end if contract workers are not brought in the mainstream of the movement. So in many places they are being organized, and they are also bargaining, they are achieving their rights, but contract workers' canvas is so vast everywhere, definitely, organization could not yet reach. But again, that's the process. By one stroke, you cannot reach up to 14th floor. You have to go step by step. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tapan. Because of lack of time, I'll have to close the session now. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with the plenary speakers. I'd like to thank Tapan, Victor Baez, Apoorva for the very interesting and fascinating interventions on the themes of this year's conference. Let's give them a loud applause. Two announcements that are going to be made, one by Red Cross and by the conference organizers. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. This is Sandeep Gross from the IO. I know we're all tired. It was a lovely first day of this conference. Let me just draw your attention to our new online course on fair wage strategies in the global economy, which we're starting on the 24th of October. So we're many, many people in this conference, and we heard today that we do not only need a vision, we also need collective action. So if all of us will forward this information, and this course is going to start to at least 10 people, can really have a big effect in trying to change the discourse to make people understand that trade unions are actually crucial agents of change against social inequality. So this online course is for free and is going to discuss the issue of social inequality, fair wage strategies, and collective bargaining. So the first step, of course, is to enroll, and you will find the address there. And then, of course, the next step is to spread the word in your networks, because, of course, people will listen much more if you just send a little message saying, I'm here at the GLUE conference, and this is the course which is starting now in October. You may be interested to join. So you will all receive a short information on this course via email by the conference organizers, and it would be wonderful if you could just spread that in your network. Thank you so much. Now Achana is going to make a few announcements at the end of the conference.
Okay, at the end of this long day, I have a couple of important announcements to make. Tomorrow the session will start at 9:30 in the morning, and we will break into parallel sessions as you would have seen in the program. The volunteers at the registration desk will guide you, because there are 2 rooms on this side, 3 rooms on this side, and 1 room on that side. So it's all in the same place. There should not be any problem for breaking up into smaller sessions. Secondly, for the trade union fora in the afternoon, from those moderators from whom we have received 1 paragraph about the discussion forum, we will print that out, make copies and keep it on the registration desk for anybody who's interested. So I hope to see you all at 9:30 in the morning, maybe 5 minutes before that, and hope you have a good evening. Thank you.